John, ESPN got Tom Brady versus the Cowboys on Monday Night Football.
And they also had the college football national championship. And
welcome back to the dumbest show that has ever run on any television channel of all time.
And we're back, the Marchand and Ourand Sports Media Podcast. I'm Andrew Marchand, sports media columnist for the New York Post. He's John Ourand, the media reporter for the Sports Business Journal. And John, good to see you. You're coming live from LA, where you were at the national championship game this week, which wasn't that great a game, but hopefully you got a lot of stuff done out there.
Cold and rainy here in LA, Andrew. Typical sports writer talk, complaining about the weather. But I want to give, before we get started on the show, I want to give a quick shout out to Jake Horowitz. That's Jamie Horowitz's son, who I ran into Jamie and his son at the game. And Jamie said, "Hey, Jake, do you know who this is? This is John Ourand." He goes, and Jake Horowitz, without skipping a beat, says, "Oh, my dad says you have the best sports podcast out there." Unbelievable. So Jake, he should be my who's up on that, Andrew.
There you go. All right. Thank you, Jake Horowitz. All right, let's go. Who's up and who's down?
Who's up? Who's down?
All right, Andrew, let me start. I'm going to give my who's up to Jimmy Pitaro of ESPN. I mean, we haven't seen the TV numbers from Monday night's Georgia TCU blowout, and I'm sure they're going to be grisly. 65-7. That was the most lopsided point differential in FBS bowl history, any bowl. Pitaro certainly wanted a closer game, but I got to tell you, after spending the last 3 days in Los Angeles, man, this is a big event, and ESPN owns it. They own all parts of it. They devoted 20 hours of studio programming across its platforms to the game on Monday. Last year's championship game, 23 million viewers for it. The Georgia-Ohio State semi, which is also ESPN's, that had about 23 million as well. Austin Karp from SBJ, he listed the top 100 telecasts for 2022. And other than the NFL and the Olympic opening ceremony, college football was the only sport to crack the top 30. And again, ESPN has it by itself, and it's had it since the BCS days. So you can understand why there is such a fervor for this expansion and the rights around all the conferences.
All right, my who's up is Cameron Maybin. And you say, well, Andrew, you just had a story this week where Maybin was dropped from Yes's game broadcast after just one season of doing Yankee games. And yes, that's true. But what I want to point out is class. So I talked to Maybin the other day, and the way he handled it, just classy. I mean, he could have been bitter. He did say he wanted to return, and he's not returning, but he wasn't. He's got a lot going on. He's a big part already of MLB Network. He does Cubs work with Marquee, and according to the Athletics' John Greenberg, Marquee's very high on him, and they should be. Very likable guy, and brought a different perspective to the booth. And this is the other thing, and I think we have a nice forum here where a lot of people in the business listen to us. I do think with social media, there is a feeling that everyone's supposed to be, pick your name, in your prime, Tim McCarver or Tony Kubek, the second you get in the booth, instead of there's a developmental process. We saw that with Ron Darling. Ron Darling with the Nationals was apparently terrible.
He was all, I don't mean to interrupt your who's up. He was awful.
He's awful. He goes to SNY. They did a good job producing him. Gary Cohen's an excellent play-by-player. He's working with his buddy Keith Hernandez. And now he's been a fixture on the LCS on Turner for years and years. And so I just wanted two things. I think I could see why Maybin has gotten all these opportunities, number one. And then number two, handling the situation with class. I just think we should point that out as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you did that. We had a similar situation in DC with Justin Kutcher, who was doing Wizards games for a long time. They fired him. He didn't want to leave, and he's maintained relatively low profile. He hasn't burned any bridges, and is doing some stuff for ESPN and Fox, and has something else in his future. So pointing out class and pointing out how to exit jobs, I think, is a good point.
That said, if anybody does want to burn bridges on the record, my phone is always open.
My email is first initial last name. Absolutely. Well, let's go to who's down, and my who's down has to be Troy Vincent. I mean, what's a Watergate cliche, Andrew? It's not the scandal, it's the cover up. And of course, during the Damar Hamlin coverage, Joe Buck announced that play would resume in 5 minutes, and the game, as we know, was ultimately canceled. But there was really a seemingly small question about where that 5 minutes came from. Why did he say 5 minutes? Whose idea was that? Well, on Monday, Don Van Natta from ESPN posted a thoroughly researched story that credibly, in my eyes, lays the blame at the feet for the 5 minute call at the feet of Troy Vincent. Here was the sort of the nut graph in his story was, while NFL officials insisted that they never intended to restart the Bills-Bengals games, the accounts of coaches, players, union officials, and team executives tell another story. Postponing the game was a ground-up decision. And honestly, this would be barely worth a mention. I'm sure I wouldn't have mentioned it if the league, and ESPN for that matter, had not been so opaque as to how to deal with it.
Nice word, opaque. Good job there.
I think I pronounced it correctly too.
Okay. Oh, you did. Yeah. Those, you were way off. Way off. A lot of text to people saying, "Would you say ethos is ethos?" Nobody. Did you admit ethos?
Yeah, I misspoke on ethos. Yes.
All right, fair enough. All right, my who's down. Tony Romo. The Bills game the other day, the start was amazing. Here's Jim Nantz on the call, and pay attention closely to the end of this call to Tony Romo.
Pittsburgh and Cleveland, Miami and the Jets were underway as New England decided to defer after winning the toss. And here's Hines on the run back, breaking a tackle and taking it past midfield. And down the sideline he goes. This is storybook. An opening kickoff return for Damar Hamlin. And this place is absolutely going wild.
Oh, you just said this is storybook. This is almost fate. I just can't believe it.
The big issue here is Romo needed to be silent there, but the crowd and the pictures take over. Nance had a pretty good call on the run back, and I don't think Romo needed to add anything. And this is and so part of this is on Romo, but just overall, this is something that the Romo Nance team just doesn't gel. And I know the big narrative, especially coming out of CBS and people close to Nance when Romo first came in, I think a lot of writers wrote this as well, and perhaps it's true, was that Nance kind of made Romo, and that's why he was better. I don't know what's gone on in that relationship or what the chemistry in the booth, but as the play-by-play guy, there's just something missing there. And again, that's on Romo for not being silent, but you think as a team, Nance is the experienced guy, has been doing it for a long time. It needs to be said, like, yeah, lay out there and let the crowd tell the story. And that's a case where more was less, and we did not need to hear Romo at that point.
Yeah, what's so interesting is you and I both agree on he shouldn't be talking over his play-by-play announcer, but what is unique about Tony Romo is that fans or friends of mine who are not part of the business, they love that. They think it shows excitement. I mean, it technically is really like, from what we know about calling games, like no producer would want that to happen, and no play-by-play person would want that to happen. But for some fans, that still does work for them, and they love that. It's no,
I think in some occasions. In that occasion, though, it's the crowd, it's the atmosphere, and then you wait, and then you give the analysis, and that's where he needed to be a little bit more patient and wait for the opportunity instead of this magical moment, with all the emotion, with Damar Hamlin better, and number 3 all around the NFL, run back in the opening kickoff at Orchard Park. It just wasn't needed. It's kind of not the biggest thing in the world, but I do think it's something that just kind of shows a little bit of the crack that we've seen over the last few years for whatever reason with Nance and Romo. And that's on Romo there for talking when he shouldn't have. And it's part of being a team though, and understanding each other and understanding how to do the broadcast together, which I think is largely a problem, is the broadcast doesn't sound together often.
All right, Andrew, let's get into the topics. You mentioned this in the opening. ESPN getting the Cowboys and Tom Brady's potentially last game in the NFL. Were you surprised by that?
Well, that's a good one. I don't think it'll be his last game in the NFL personally, but a little surprised. I do think if you look at the circumstances of what's just gone on with Damar Hamlin, maybe that worked into it. That to me was the biggest reason, most likely, is that they basically missed the game for Monday night. So they got the most marquee matchup. I mean, Buck and Aikman might have helped a little bit, but I think it had more to do with the circumstances of missing that final game because of the Hamlin situation in Cincinnati with the Bills and the Bengals.
They got huge viewership when Scott Van Pelt came on, but then they didn't have any commercials where they could go do it. So they must have lost in the tens of millions of dollars in terms of commercials there. So that's what would really make sense in terms of why they got that game. But also, this isn't the ESPN package, wild card package from before, where they had the first game of the weekend on a Saturday afternoon. This is a primetime game on Monday night. So ESPN, without the Damar Hamlin situation, was in line to get a premier level game. I was surprised to see them get the top game of the weekend, but they were certainly in line to get a better game than what they had been getting in past years.
Okay, and as we go forward, we're going to try to incorporate some of the questions we get from you guys through Twitter. And one that we got from Uncle Sloppy Joe on Twitter.
Sloppy Joe, Sloppy Joe, come on.
Which is quite a name. His real name apparently is Joe Simons. Thanks, Joe. Or Uncle Sloppy Joe. Can you explain how the game times and networks are decided for NFL playoffs, specifically the first 2 weeks? It's got to be something like a really small draft, right? So how's it work?
It works that the networks, they go and they lobby the NFL and they beg for the best games. And it's an intense amount of lobbying that you typically used to see around, the Super Bowl when they're lobbying for the best games of the next season. And so, everybody put in a request for that Cowboys game, and it ended up going to ESPN. So that ultimately, there are networks that are going to be upset with what they end up with. Of course, CBS gets the AFC game and Fox gets an NFC game right now. But then you throw like ESPN into the mix, you throw NBC into the mix, and they have to take some and move them around. What surprised me about Wild Card Weekend is NBC, of Sunday Night Football fame, didn't end up with a marquee matchup, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree. They didn't, but still not terrible. You got that AFC North matchup, the Bengals and the Ravens, and then Al Michaels and Tony Dungy. They got a good game. I like that Jacksonville Charger game. Might feel Thursday night-ish, but those are two great quarterbacks that you get to feature. Al Michaels and Dungy on that. So some interesting things broadcasting-wise. The other one in play, John, is Sean McVay, who by the time this podcast comes out may have already stepped down from the Rams. I think the part about McVay, when you look at broadcasting, I don't think there's a $20 million plus a year job like he had potentially with Amazon if he'd wanted to be Al Michaels' partner starting this year. There's no game analyst jobs right now. And the question for him is, and I've been told from some people who are close to him that he might like more interested in doing games than being a studio analyst, is it might be better not doing anything or doing maybe podcasts, staying in it a little bit than kind of hurting his value, potentially as a game analyst one day, because he could still coach again if he does, time to come out. He's coming out eventually. It's obvious. If it doesn't happen this year, it's happening next year, the year after. It seems pretty certain that McVay is not with the Rams for the long haul. But I do think he's an interesting equation, and he could try to do other things with new media. I mean, he's in his 30s. This isn't like an old curmudgeon guy.
Yeah, by the way, that advice is great advice. Timing is everything. We talk often about Tony Romo and how he got that $18 million a year job, and it was because ESPN started to try to poach him. And it's like selling a house. You get more than one bidder, all of a sudden the numbers go up. If he had come out last year, there were plenty of openings because Amazon was a new streamer, a new rights partner that was coming in, and it needed to build it up. And then you had all the movement, the free agent frenzy. That's not going to happen this year. You have people that are set. So do you want to come out and potentially go the Jason Witten route where it's like, wow, that guy wasn't as good as we thought he was?
Well, if you get $20 million, then fine. But like, if you don't get the 20 mil, you need to get the money first.
Nobody's going to pay 20 mil for the number 2 analyst.
No, not for the number. No chance in the booth. Is there a combo deal that he could do with an Amazon or Disney where it's podcasts and all these other things? I don't think he's at that Manning, Brady level, but is there something to be done there? There might be something creative to be done there. I could see it. ESPN was in on Brady. I mean, not at 37.5 million, more like I think 15, 20 million without doing games. McVay's, so there could be a good amount of money out there.
If I were him, I would worry about if I went into the ESPN ecosystem, I would be one of how many ex-coaches that's kind of talking. Then you really have to sort of, get ahead of it. Now it's more about paying for the potential that you think he's going to be really good, as opposed to coming in and just kind of being fit someplace. So, be patient. This isn't going to be the situation 2 decades from now.
Yeah, I could see Fox maybe for the Super Bowl coverage, playoff coverage, maybe going after McVay or Aaron Rodgers as just kind of an add-on for their studio stuff. A guy named Tom Brady. He's not going to be in the booth, obviously. And I'm not sure he'll even be in studio if they get eliminated. But he's a guy who they've made an investment in, I believe. And so I think, he's a possibility as well. All right, let's hit on a couple more NFLs before we get out of here. This is something sensitive issue, I think. Greg Gumbel had a rough final game and season this year. CBS is going to have to make some decisions on this. This is a little bit tough to listen to, but this is from the other day, the Browns-Steeler game. This is a touchdown call. Keep in mind, Deshaun Watson is the quarterback of the Browns.
Brissett still with the ball. Now throws inside the 5 to the end zone. Njoku with Deshaun Watson. There he is. And now Njoku on the receiving end.
Yeah, that's tough to listen to. Greg Gumbel has had a tremendous career. And so it's hard. This is a hard thing. We've seen this with broadcasters. I'm not saying it's age related. I don't know what's going on in that situation, but you want to be sensitive to the man's career and how great Greg Gumbel has been over the years from his ESPN days on to CBS. But they're gonna have to figure that out because obviously that's not what you want. And Gumbel struggled at times throughout the year, but really was highlighted this week.
All right, Andrew, I'm in LA. I spent Sunday on the Fox lot at Fox Studios as they were going through what Billy Wanger called controlled chaos inside the production room. As a viewer, how did Fox perform?
Yeah, I think Fox and CBS both did a good job. This is why. It's a minor thing. To me, it's basic sports television. However, Fox had trouble with this during the World Cup. I don't know if I've mentioned, I didn't really, I wasn't as fond as their coverage. And so during the last Sunday of the playoffs, the CBS and Fox had the scores from the other games that are impacting the game you're watching up on the screen, which is smart. It's one-stop shopping, and that's what you should have in the group stage of the World Cup, which is basically similar to last week of the playoffs. They didn't do that for some reason. And so I thought that was good. So a plus to them. DirecTV says goodbye, John. Let's hit on that. What's your take on that after, what was it, 1994? How long is it?
1994. That's what is that? 10, 20, almost 30 years of a Sunday Ticket on DirecTV. They finally said goodbye. And if my Twitter feed is real life, they're losing subscribers by the boatload right now with people that only had DirecTV for access to Sunday Ticket. I'm not going to do the story. I can't do the story until we actually see what the results are at their next quarterly earnings call to see how much they actually lost in terms of subscribers. That's something to look at. But DirecTV really, when it launched in 1994, it launched with Sunday Ticket, and Sunday Ticket and the NFL, I truly believe, just like they helped build ESPN and just like the NFL helped build Fox Sports, it really helped build DirecTV into a place for sports fans. And so this really is a seminal moment in TV viewing. But DirecTV still is the front runner to maintain Sunday Ticket as a commercial licensee, where they're going to sell it to bars and to restaurants and things along those lines. Because bars and restaurants, they're not set up to take to stream to every TV. They don't have YouTube TV boxes in every single bar and restaurant. DirecTV is already there, but this is going to be an interesting deal to follow because as with the NFL and Apple, the NFL wants a lot, but DirecTV has all the leverage here because who else is going to sell it to bars and restaurants? They're the only game in town. So how this progresses is going to be interesting to watch. And the fact that they don't have a deal already suggests that they're maybe not as close as I would have expected that they would be.
Yeah, I could see that. Being a little bit contentious given, the recent history and DirecTV trying to get out of that deal. All right, let's move to our final topic under NFL, the top 100 shows. Now, if you're someone like me, someone like you, anybody listening who writes about sports media, writes about the NFL, we've been saying that 75 of the top 100 shows for the previous year were NFL games. What are we going to be writing now? What's the number out of 100 for next season, John, that we're writing?
Honestly, this is stunning to me, Andrew. 82 games cracked the list, according to and I got to give a shout out to Austin Karp, our SBJ's ratings guru, who compiles this list every single year. 82 games this year, up from 75 last year, 72 the year before, 78 the year before. It seems like a broken record now, but I just want to emphasize this is all television. I mean, as growing up, the idea that sports would dominate television like this is, it's a really an incredible achievement. And of those 82 games, they're regular season games. It's not all Super Bowl and playoffs. I mean, they can't be with those 82. And if you throw in college football of all genres in television, not just sports again, but all genres, college football plays 4. So 86 American football games were on the list, as was the State of the Union address, but that goes across multiple networks. It still gets a higher number than I would have expected. One main point about the list that I have to highlight is the Olympics. The Olympics would always, every 4 years, or I guess every 2 years, would dominate the list. But this year, or actually not this year, but 2022, they put forth a record low number of telecasts in the top 100. 2 nights. One was the opening ceremony, which always ranks high, and the other was the Olympics that came right after the Super Bowl, which is just shocking if you think about that. 4 years earlier, the Winter Games from Pyeongchang, that was 12 nights that got in the top 100. Beijing, it turned into 2. That's something that bears watching.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that LA Olympics will do much better. I do think the time zone makes a big difference for the Olympics.
Totally. By the way, when I say it bears watching, I sounded skeptical. Paris is going to be great.
Yep.
LA after that is going to be great. The Olympics are getting ready to just be.
Yeah, I wouldn't be as worried. Yeah, if I'm NBC, I think it's about to have an upswing. I also think no fans, the whole.
Yeah.
There's a lot of issues with that Olympics, that make it so. Yes, that's not good for it, but also that you could see why it didn't do as well. All right, let's move to college football. Hit on some topics here.
All right, you know what I'm most interested about college football? I was at the game, so I didn't watch any coverage.
Okay.
But my Twitter feed was inundated with McAfee. We had McAfee in the opening. Did you watch him?
I did. Well, I watched both. I had the double TV action going. I had Fowler and Herbstreit on the top TV, and then I had McAfee and company on the bottom TV.
So can you explain for a second, what's your situation? Do you have TVs the same size, one on top, one on bottom?
I'm looking at it right now. It's in my office. So in my office, I got a 3 television setup. You can bring out the iPad if you need a 4th screen. So I got one on the wall, one on like a little desk, countertop, and then I got my computer screen on my desk that's also relatively big. So yeah, it's a pretty good setup.
Hey, kids, don't bother me. I'm working.
It embarrasses my kids. We're gonna have one of my daughter's friends stay for college, and she's like, she's not staying in your office. I mean, that's where the guest room is too. And like embarrassed by the 3 kids, but gotta make a living, gotta pay for this college. So somebody's gotta watch all these things. Yeah, so I did watch both. Obviously, the game was terrible. This was a Manning cast or Omaha production cast. Here's the thing about it. So I find McAfee entertaining. This was entertaining. It was basically the Pat McAfee show, whose roots are from Barstool. And so it's kind of a Barstool sort of, we're sort of in on a joke with you kind of thing that they're doing. That's the type of comedy where not making fun of it, but having fun, which is good. The one thing I would say, and the ratings will come out before the podcast. So I try to think why is something so successful and can it be replicated? So why has the Manning cast been so successful? Well, obviously there's great chemistry between Peyton and his brother Eli, and Eli making fun of Peyton. Peyton's brain on football is at a different level. Peyton Manning's one of the greats of all time. Eli's a Super Bowl legend. But I think what really separates it beyond all those things is that they're not on all the time. Now, Eli has been, on more things, but it's more streaming stuff. It's more things you have to find. So I think with McAfee, while it is good, and I did find it entertaining, McAfee's doing the same show every day. So you can get that. It's not unique to the college. Now, this is difficult for Omaha Productions. If they're going to be valued at $1 billion, then you got to come up with some ideas that are unique. And I'm not saying it's a McAfee. McAfee is a good choice, but can they find another formula where you can do what they do with the Manning cast, with some of these old casts on? And like the NBA, for example, who would I want? I mean, Michael Jordan, right? I'd like to see him. LeBron, if you could get him, obviously he's playing at the moment. Magic, to a point. Bird and Magic, that's one that I think I'd effort to get. I think that could be really good. Now it depends if they're willing to talk, are they willing to have fun, are they going to joke around? But that could be some good chemistry. And again, they all want to. There's a price tag on all this stuff, so is it worth it to ESPN, to Omaha Productions? But that's the one thing I would say, when you talk about it.
I agree with you totally where these work based on talent. But the reason to me that the Manning cast is so successful is that Peyton is an A1 TV talent. He's hosted Saturday Night Live and did well on that. He's been great in commercials. There's a reason that all the TV networks were trying to get him for a lot of money. Like, he's able to do it. So Bird and Magic, would they be good on TV? Like, if you talk about, what I'd love to see. I mean, I didn't see the McAfee, so I'm just talking more at a 50,000 foot level than going down there. But let's say the Celtics are in the NBA Finals. Wouldn't I love to see like the Bill Simmons show live with the rights, just like going through and like I'd be sitting next to Bill Simmons and listening to the Bill Simmons show doing that. McAfee, the McAfee show is being replicated, but it's being replicated around some of the most high cost rights that are in TV sports right now. So it is unique. What makes it more unique is that he's doing his show for the game and as the game is happening, and it's a vehicle to see that. So I would almost go away from, all right, let's just get like a legend of whatever sport, unless they're like a Peyton level, like if it's Charles Barkley on the NBA, yeah, I'll totally do that. But like Michael Jordan,
that would be my impression, and I hear you on that. All right, let's go. You got college football rights. What do you got on that?
CFP rights. I got to give you some grief because you gave me grief last pod when we had 2 semifinal games that were great. And then look what happens. This is like, I mean, what do you think is going to happen when this expands? There are going to be so many blowouts.
Boise State again, going to Tuscaloosa.
Maybe
do Athens because Georgia.
I don't want to talk about Boise State. I don't want to talk about Boise State anymore. I want to talk about TCU, maybe. I guess, right? But
deserve credit to Horned Frogs, but yeah, you're right. That's a tough watch.
All that notwithstanding, the rights are going to go for a boatload. ESPN, as my Who's Up indicated, they love just owning all of it right now, and they want to continue to own.
You gotta go for a boat. I thought you said it wasn't worth it the early rounds.
Oh, I don't think it is. I think you're buying.
Wait, hold on a second. Is it worth it or not? You got to pick. You just said now it is worth it.
I don't think it's worth it. Do I think that they're going to
stupid TV executives think it is?
Yeah. Do I think they're going to break the bank? Yeah, I think they're going to break the bank.
I'm only kidding when I call you stupid TV executives. It's a joke.
Yeah, they're dumb TV executives. No, they want to be a part of the playoff. And if you catch magic like ESPN did on New Year's Eve, then it's great. But it's a lot of times, I mean, you knew. In the stadium, you knew midway through the first quarter, like, oh boy, yeah, okay, this game is pretty much toast.
We had some news last week. I reported that NBC for the Big Ten is going to have Noah Eagle and Todd Blackledge in their booth. I like this booth. I think when you're a new group, like you're doing a new conference, marquee event, primetime on Saturdays, you want to come out strong. Noah Eagle, I get it. He's young, 26, son of Iron Eagle. I've listened to him a lot. The kid is excellent. And I think that's a good choice. That's a situation where, yes, he's someone's son, but he's really good. And he's gotten opportunities because he can do it. He sounds a lot like his father, who might be the best play-by-player in the business. And so that's a pretty good start. And then Todd Blackledge has been really good for, very solid for a long time. It gives you that credibility, has Big Ten background, even though I don't think, I'm pretty sure Penn State wasn't in the Big Ten when he played there, but they're in the Big Ten now. And so I thought that was good. And I've coined them the Blackbird booth.
By my Blackbird.
Proof that you work for the New York Post and I work for SBJ. That's a great name, the Blackbird.
Thank you, John. Let's transition from college football and hit on a topic. One of your favorite topics, Sinclair.
RSNs, I love it.
So, what when do we think they're going to bankruptcy? I know you've talked about it, like basically it's going to happen. And my question is this, because I do think some birdies out there have said maybe it happens in the first quarter of this year. And if it does, and this is really my question, okay, I'm not really asking you to predict because you've already basically said that you think it's going to happen. I think basically everyone in sports believes. This is my big question because this is something I'm really understanding even more. And I just think it's going to be a humongous story because that's what's fun about our covering media is a lot of this stuff, it just expands into the stratosphere. And like college football, the media aspect of it really was the biggest part of all the deals. So that's why it's fun to cover what we cover. But I think this one also has that potential. So my question to you now, right, and this is for all these people who are listening, who cover teams around, what is it going to mean for these teams? That's my question when they go into bankruptcy and their rights are basically worth nothing all of a sudden, correct?
Not necessarily nothing, but it will be a disaster. This is why I'm actually a little bit skeptical that they're going to go into bankruptcy, even though, like you, I'm hearing increasing noise about this. And to be clear, it's Diamond Sports going into bankruptcy,
okay.
Potentially, not Sinclair. And the reason is if they go into bankruptcy, all hell breaks loose. Nobody has control of it. So there's not going to be a very simple, elegant way for Major League Baseball to go in and reclaim those rights. So potentially, if you're the Detroit Tigers and you're part of the Bally Sports RSN, in Detroit, Bally Sports Detroit, if Diamond Sports goes into bankruptcy, they don't have to pay the Tigers, from my knowledge, their rights fee. They will eventually, but they can essentially take out, interest-free loans to say, like, well, we owe this to you, but we're unable to pay it because we're in bankruptcy. And the Tigers and every other team have built into what they pay, what they pay the people that work for the team, what they pay the players, what they pay everybody. This media revenue is a huge part of the revenue that they bring in. It's the biggest part by far, more than ticket sales or sponsorships or anything else. So there is if it goes into bankruptcy, nobody knows what's going to happen. Everybody I talk to says that every side wants to avoid bankruptcy because they lose control.
I want to hit on, we're going to wrap it up shortly, but I want to hit on one other thing though. Let's just say MLB is able to take back their rights, and this affects the NBA, affects the NHL, and affects Major League Baseball. We're focused on MLB for the moment. Who's going to buy them, right? Does an Amazon come in and buy these rights and offer them locally, in hopes of one day making this into this bigger business? Does Apple, doesn't really seem like they would do this, but Apple likes to have everything. But is this how they start to have that model where you go through Apple? And is there a way to make up that revenue with world, getting rid of the footprints that are all around and having it so you can buy it anywhere, which obviously changes the game because that would apply to all teams. So the Yankees could sell directly with Yes Network in Tampa the games. You can get the Yes Network in Tampa, you just don't get the games. So where do you see so that's where, to me, this is going to become such a huge story, because where's that money going to be replaced? Like, who's going to pay for this? There's not an obvious place. Teams are still doing deals with Bally's. There's nobody else.
I know the NFL is separate, and to compare anything to the NFL is foolhardy because the NFL is so popular. But the NFL's Sunday pick ticket out of market package just sold for $2 billion, for more than $2 billion a year. Unbelievably. So you just have to think about these rights differently. Like, the RSN business is right now a bad business, but the local rights, the rights to local games, are still valuable. So if you're a Major League Baseball and you take extra innings and you package it with the local team rights, and you get and then you sell it to an Apple, and then you truly get like an iTunes of sports of sorts,
but the problem is the Yankees aren't going to play in that game.
And that's the big problem. And the other
Mets
problem,
aren't going to play in that game, I don't think.
And the other problem that I foresee, this is why there's no real elegant solution. If you get the NBA and baseball together to do sort of an all sports streaming service, like, who owns more of it? They're not going to agree on any of that. Baseball's going to say, like, well, we play 162 games, so we should get 70%.
ESPN, we didn't even mention the mothership. I mean,
well, the federal government made ESPN divest the RSNs in the first place. So, I think they would still be interested in it, but they've already been told no by a former administration. And this administration that's currently in there is less likely to allow something like that to happen.
All right. So lot to talk about, Sinclair. I just wanted to bring that one up.
Yeah, I love it. I finally got excited on this pod.
I know. You love it, Sinclair talk. All right. You have one last item before we go?
Ryan Glass-Beagle, New York Post colleague of yours, I described him as a Gen Zer last week, and I just want to offer an official apology to Ryan. He's a millennial. I would have pegged him for Gen Z. He's a millennial, but in my household, I rate Gen Z much higher than millennials. So that was actually a compliment.
Oh, there you go. All right. So Glass, you got a comment there. Glass, great follow on Twitter, and he'll break stories for us on sports media, and has tremendous content all over. If it's a Glass-Beagle story, you guaranteed to be interesting. Okay, it could be on anything, but it could guarantee to be. Honestly, what are we trying to do here? Be interesting. We're covering sports. So great job, Glass. Always does a great job. All right, John, you always do a great job as well. If you can like the pod, you can follow it. If you give it 5 stars, if you say something nice about it, it's very much appreciated. And of course, we want to thank the people who put this together, Chris Mason and AC Wyatt. As always, we appreciate their work.
Yeah, I got to run and catch a flight back east, man. So always fun. Thanks for listening.
Safe flying, buddy.